Hi, I'm Phil, and this is my shop tour. Now, after the last video, I had several people ask about doing a tour of what my home shop looks like. So I'm going to do that in the course of a series of videos looking at each of the different sections. And we're going to start over here on one end. Now, the big thing to think about with my workshop is that it's actually just a really long and narrow space. It's about 8 feet wide from the back wall to a divider wall that I've put up in my garage. Then it goes the full width of what the garage is. So it's about 28 feet or so, maybe a little bit less. And I've struggled with trying how to figure out how to conceptualize this over the years. So there's different ways of looking at it. And not that long ago, I thought of an analogy that would work out really well here. And it's that if you've ever toured a World War II submarine, now for me in my home state, that was the USS Cobia. And it's really interesting to see because what you have is basically a long corridor and then all of the functions are off of that corridor. In a very similar way, that's what's going on, or that's how my workshop has developed over the years, is that I have a long passageway, more or less, with different functions of woodworking on either side of it and an entrance right around the middle. So we're going to start here aft in my materials storage rack. Now this one was featured in Shop Notes magazine, actually the last Shop Notes magazine before it ceased its print publication run. So issue number 138. And Chris Fitch designed it. It's called the Ultimate Lumber Rack. And for a few years, that's how I used it, was as a lumber rack. But as I've used it more and grown in how I've been using my shop, I've found that it's actually more of a material storage station. So we're going to look at the different sections of it because as you can see, there's really just a lot going on around here. So that's what we're going to do, is look at the different sections, what I have in there, and why. So while it's tempting to want to go from top to bottom or bottom to top on this thing, I'm going to start right here in the middle. So we have 2 shelves that contain most of my loose or unassigned lumber. Right now I'm in a little bit of a Eastern white pine kick, so that's what's predominantly on these shelves. I also have some walnut left over from a couple of other projects that I've been working on, some construction lumber way in the back, some basswood that I've been using for carving, and then even a few pieces of some white fir that I had used on my workbench project. So one of the key features about this storage rack is that instead of just simple shelves where you put long boards of lumber, this one's the full 8 feet wide, is that there are also these cubbies here just underneath the shelves. So under each shelf is four cubbies that can hold smaller pieces or what have you. So for example, on this middle section where I'm talking, over here on the side, I keep like my short pieces of really nice figured white pine. I have some plywood and some exotics, a few odds and ends items that I'm just not entirely ready to get rid of quite yet. Then in the middle, again, we have more. This is where I keep some of my carvable pieces, let's call it. So I have some basswood that's in here, some white pine chunks that I can use for smaller carving pieces, a lattice panel system that Dylan designed for a project from Woodsmith. We had a couple of extra ones left over from a video prop. It just feels too nice to throw away, but I don't really have a specific use for them just yet. Moving along farther, we get to pieces where I would consider as like projects in process or project components. So I have an old end grain cutting board that I want to use for a gift project. And then farther down is a book rack and a snack tray and cutting board. That's where that cutting board piece is going to go to, is for that thing. On the lower of the middle shelves, you'll see back over here in the corner, I have a set of wedges that I use. mostly for splitting apart logs when I do that sort of thing for greenwood carving. A little shout out to my friend Dave Fisher there. I also keep a hatchet over there and a kind of a hardened hand saw. Use that a lot in yard work too when I have to clean up from my soft maple trees that are, let's call them self-pruning. And then this other middle cubby right here keeps a lot of my safety gear. Push pads, push blocks, some shop-made feather boards. It's a nice way to keep those things close at hand. All right, way up here on top, this must be what Chris Fitch feels like every day. Up here is where I keep a lot of my longer term storage things. So starting over here on the end, I have a couple of platens that I use for veneering work, a fan for when it turns out to be summer. I keep several jigs up here for some of the classes that I teach because I need to have some of that stuff on the road with me. Some of them are table saw jigs and I don't have a table saw in my shop anymore. So I keep those around just for those teaching classes. I also have a couple of projects here that I want to rebuild and work on as well. There's also a saw sharpening vise. I'm a little bit of an experimental woodworker, and sometimes I build something thinking that it's going to be a great idea, and then I don't really use it, but I don't really want to get rid of it. So up here it goes out of the way. Now, as for the cubby sections up here, I've started keeping some pieces of cardboard around here for doing prototypes and mock-ups. Sometimes they work pretty well as patterns too. It's just an idea that I picked up from Adam Savage and I'm shamelessly stealing it to use here. I also have some other pieces of softwood, some of my vegan woodworking we'll call it, that I want to hold on to. This was the vice jaw of my first workbench, and it's some really nice tight-grained Douglas fir. I want to hold on to it. Sentimental reasons, and I think maybe I could make something small out of it. That grain is just too much to throw away or burn right now. Some more Douglas fir pieces. The other jaw for that workbench, tried to make like a big twin screw vise, and it was a great idea and concept and didn't really work out too well in execution. The other latest thing that I've done is down here on the end is I've put a lot of my narrow pieces. So leftover bits of molding and dowel stock, some aluminum pieces there, just as a way to consolidate all of the stuff in my shop that I use as raw materials. We now come to the lower half of the material storage racking back here. And the main level is kind of at a workbench or countertop height, at least it is for me. And originally I had put a hand miter box right here. It had a wide miter station for it there. But again, it was just one of those things where it seemed like a great idea, but I just don't use it that way. So out it went, and instead I put a narrow belt sander that we built for the TV show, and I finished it up, brought it home, and it's actually proven to be a pretty handy addition to my workspace here, and actually fits well with the machinery section that we'll be talking about in the next video. I also keep a router table here, and then working down the line, one of my loose tenon jigs and some more white pine back in the corner. Now this section, instead of the cubbies, has drawers for the lower section. These have been really a godsend, because I can keep on one of them here, I keep a lot of my patterns and templates that I've made for different projects. The next one over is for all of my router gear, and then kind of a catch-all one way back in the corner where it's a little more difficult to get to. Then down below is a shelf that I keep for stuff that I want to hold on to and I use pretty frequently. So I have some packing blankets here to keep projects and work pieces safe, moving in and out of cars and things like that. My drill press powered edge sander lives down here. That's a great place for it. I have a couple of other miter boxes, miter vise, my router loose tenon jig, and then back in the corner, some leftover maple from a soft maple tree that we had taken down in our yard a few years ago. Got that in a plastic bag just to keep it from getting too dried out. Now I keep a drawer that has some miter bars for jigs and a couple of extra extension cords. Then I have a big drawer for all of my bandsaw accessories. quite a few things going on in there. And then there's also a drawer where I have extra sanding belts and a Kreg jig for working on the deck. And then the last one back there thankfully doesn't have very much in it, and that kind of makes me a little happy because sometimes I feel like this shop gets a little too crowded. Even the floor turns into a shelf where I can keep some more packing blankets, toolboxes for when I teach and take stuff out on the road with me, and then some large pieces of wood that I can use to support pieces of plywood or projects if I need to set up a temporary work surface. So that takes care of this end of the workshop. Like I said, keeping that submarine analogy, we're going to continue moving forward in the next couple of videos. I'll try and throw some how-to stuff and some project stuff in there as well, so it's not just one big shop tour after another. Hey, if you have any questions or comments, I'd really like to know what you think and what you do for material storage in your own shop. You know, as much as I love this project, it does have one place where it kind of falls down. And maybe you've picked up on it already, and that there's really no place to store bigger pieces of plywood or other sheet stock. And so that's what I have kind of right here in the corner, is a little stack of that kind of stuff. Kind of gets in the way, but I've made my peace with it for now. So thanks for watching, and then we'll see you back here next time here in my shop.